Hey, good afternoon, guys. It looks like we've got a second term of Trump. That seems to be the news. So, obviously, it's still early days, but I just want to touch on some of the things that I guess kind of already happened, starting to happen, and eventually could happen in terms of this as a news story. So, one thing that's really been obvious, right, is the kind of the dollar strength. There's a couple of key levels. If you mix in what I've talked about with the mechanical trading and the structure for liquidity, why the liquidity, where the liquidity, and so on. 108 in terms of the price point for me is still something that's pretty strong. It is quite an aggressive move overall, but there's a lot to it, especially on the higher time frames. So I think before any real movement, in terms of the kind of next couple of months, I would like to see something up towards this 108 level, right? I think the 100 and what is it, 100.70 level has actually held quite nice. So I think when you look at what this means for oil, for gold, for silver, for any kind of commodity, as well as the stock market overall, a strong dollar, right? I guess it could be perceived as a negative in terms of some of these prices, right? But you also have to understand and to appreciate that a lot of the prices that we've had a rally in, we've had not much of a pullback on either. All right. So if we look at gold, great example. Part of the reason for the negative correlation with gold and dollar, 9 times out of 10, right, is a lot of investors run to gold when the market is in this uncertain time, this uncertain situation overall. So although we've got this very, very nice looking uptrend, I think now a little bit of certainty has come to the market. Gold, I'm expecting in the next couple of weeks to have at least a bit of a pullback, right? So again, following the liquidity, following the levels, following the lines. If we zoom out a little bit on gold, we have a couple of key levels, right? We've got a little bit of a cluster sitting in there, bigger cluster here. So it wouldn't be a surprise over the next, 3 months, 6 months. I wouldn't be surprised to see a $400 discount on gold coming into the market, right? Now, I know a lot of you guys will be looking for Bitcoin, and Bitcoin is something I'll cover obviously next. But just before touching on Bitcoin, I think the stock market as a whole, we've got a lot of earning reports out with very little, I guess, kind of underpinning the actual earnings. So again, pretty similar to gold. I'm expecting a bit of a pullback in terms of the level. Now, unfortunately, when it comes to the mechanical trading side, because the indices are designed ultimately to go up, just up by nature, they're a little bit harder in terms of understanding where the liquidity sits. All right. So there's a couple of key things for me. We've got this area here, right, with a nice little pullback. And we've also got this area here that tends to overlap, right? So the biggest thing for me is if I was to take some kind of average of this position, go 50%. And again, I'd like to see a $700-800 drop on this, right? And that's not to say that's the be all and end all, that's kind of done. I'm saying I'd like to see that before any real decision making, if you will, with the market as a whole is actually played out, right? So what I'd like to see is a pullback, and at that point then to reassess the situation to understand whether we're likely to continue on up or whether or not that pullback will be a pullback of the internal pullback, and then we drop down obviously further. At that point, I'll start looking at obviously further projections to the downside, should obviously that happens, right? So at the moment, and especially kind of day one, what I would say is, go away, play some golf, go cut the grass, whatever you do. Just spend a little bit of time away from the market. Let the market kind of settle with the new news. Let's see what kind of happens over the next couple of days. And then to finish with, what I'm going to do is I'm just going to touch on Bitcoin. So now a lot of people, I guess, kind of have this kind of conception that, Trump coming in is going to be good for Bitcoin. To a degree, yes. However, you've also got to understand the liquidity implications of this in terms of a market, right? Now, what we have clear as day is a nice ascending move here. We have the previous all-time high, and we've poked our heads above by, somewhere in the region. What was this high? This region here, 73.8. So we are literally going $1,500, $1,600 at a push, and we've already started to reject. We have a wick from the candle before, so I wouldn't be surprised if this was actually a sweep type move, right? I think the whole perception that, Trump good for Bitcoin equals up and only up. I think that's where a lot of composite man's games will come in. I think we've got to start looking at some liquidity to the downside before any kind of potential move back up, right? And that's not bearish in any sense. This is ultimately just looking at, why and where and what. Now, my fear with any kind of drop is I think how the retail sentiment will actually read this. I think any drop, especially in the early days, in the first couple of weeks of the new presidency, I think what I can actually see happening is fear setting in, and then this kind of perpetual motion happening on the back of the fear. It's why isn't this going up? I don't understand. I thought this was going up. I assumed this would go up and only up, and therefore I got kind of a little bit of a suspicion that I think we could easily tag these lows down here again, pretty much like gold, pretty much like the stock market. I think instead of trying to predict where these could ultimately go, I think the general idea is to wait until we see the end of the sweep. Let's wait for a change of character, smaller time frame, and then I think as we start to near some of the key areas, some of this liquidity down here, I think we want to be reassessing the market to understand whether or not it's likely to ping back up, we fill a bigger wick, or whether or not the liquidity that we've kind of accepted from up high will actually be enough fuel for a deeper drop or a slower, more kind of painful type drop. So I think for me, the market is pretty much, kind of as expected given the news. I think obviously gold settling, that's kind of a key economic factor globally. I think obviously the news on Trump being was obviously to drive Bitcoin. So I guess look, nothing's really changed grand schemes of things. We haven't kind of powered through as you would expect in terms of taking liquidity and running with it. We've actually done almost the opposite. We've filled a wick. We've come up $1,500, and we've started to reject already. So, you know, I think the market is doing what the market was already programmed to do, and that's where we are. So, obviously, I'll put some more updates out in the next couple of weeks, and yeah, just take it easy, take care, and I'll see you on the next stream. Thanks for watching, guys.